Hey guys, in today's video, meet Cassian, a man who faced death 3 times and came back with an urgent and shocking message about the future of humanity, including a warning for November 23, 2024. What he saw on the other side it's chilling and can change everything you believe about life and spirituality. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to follow every detail of this transformative story. Let's get started. I was never a person who thought much about spirituality. In 1983, I was 24 years old and believed I had everything under control. He worked in a small office in Sedona, Arizona, and spent his weekends hanging out with friends or driving the deserted roads around town. It was a Friday night when my life changed forever. I was returning home after visiting a friend. The road was narrow and poorly lit, and I drove distractedly, thinking about the work week. In an instant, I lost control of the car on a curve. I remember the sound of tires skidding on the asphalt and then a deafening crash as my car collided with a telephone pole. Everything was silent. Then I found myself floating. I didn't know what was happening, but I looked down and saw my body inert in the driver's seat. The windshield glass was shattered, the steering wheel was deformed, and there was blood. Lots of blood. Is that it? I thought, with a strange sense of calm. I felt no fear or pain, just an indescribable curiosity. As I watched the scene, I realized something else was present. A figure shrouded in warm light stood to my left. Cassian, a voice echoed in my mind, not my ears. The presence didn't seem human, but it exuded such pure energy that I felt enveloped in peace. Before I could react, we were taken through a tunnel. The walls seemed to be made of glowing clouds, soft to the touch even though I didn't have a physical body to touch anything. We emerged into a wide field, where a light breeze caressed what must have been my face. The figure looked at me with something I can only describe as infinite love. You are a spirit, living a temporary human experience. This is not the end, but a new beginning. Remember this when you return. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital. My body hurt every inch, but the weight I had been carrying before the accident was gone. I was no longer the same. I understood that life is much more than the physical, and that we are spiritual travelers. 6 years have passed since the accident. In 1989, my life felt like a whirlwind. After what happened that night on the road, I promised myself I would change. But over time, routine and old habits pulled me back. I was living in New York, a city that never sleeps, and just like her, I was exhausted. My life was work, parties, and addictions. I began to move away from the essence I had felt in my first near-death experience. Little by little, the memory of that bucolic countryside and loving presence became just a distant echo. Then, one winter night, everything changed. I was alone in my little apartment in Queens. There was a bottle of whiskey on the table and a pile of overdue reports on the couch. As I tried to balance work and my self-destructive distractions, I felt an intense pain in my chest. It was as if an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. Not now, I muttered, falling to the floor. My vision went dark, and the last thing I heard was the muffled sound of the television in the background. When I woke up, I was no longer in my apartment. Everything around me was white, a white so pure and brilliant that it seemed infinite. There was no floor, sky, or walls, just me and that vast space. Suddenly, a giant screen appeared in front of me. It felt like a holographic projection, showing scenes from my life. I saw the boy I once was, running through the fields of Sedona. I saw moments of joy, like the first time I played the guitar, and moments of pain, like when I fought with my father before leaving home. Then the scenes changed. I saw opportunities that I missed because I was distracted or scared. I saw the people I hurt unintentionally, just by not being truly present in their lives. Cassian, the same voice I heard years ago, echoed again. The figure of light reappeared, now brighter than before. The present is the only real moment. Every second you waste is a lost chance to transform your life and the lives around you. I came back with tears streaming down my face. The pain in my chest had gone, but the message was recorded. I understood that the past is a teacher, the future is a possibility, but the present is where everything happens. Life seemed to have given me second and third chances, but even so, I still hadn't completely changed. In the early 1990s, I left New York and returned to Arizona, seeking some peace. I chose Sedona because I always felt there was something special about the place. Maybe it was the spiritual whirlpools or the red mountains that seemed to whisper ancient secrets, yet the peace he sought was out of reach. The memories of my near deaths were a mystery I couldn't completely unravel. Sometimes I wondered if it had all been a hallucination. It was on a sunny morning that the third experience found me. I was riding my bike on a dirt trail near town. The fresh air felt invigorating, and the sound of nature gave me a false sense of tranquility. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn to look, something heavy hit my head. I felt a searing pain and fell to the ground. When I tried to get up, another blow hit my back, knocking all the air out of my lungs. I passed out. When I opened my eyes, I was in a place I can't fully describe. It was dark and damp, as if it were inside a cave or underground. All around me were shadowy shapes, moving and whispering in a language I didn't recognize. My heart was heavy, and the feeling was of total abandonment. "Why am I here?" I shouted, but my voice seemed to dissolve into the void. Then, a light appeared in front of me, cutting through the darkness like a sword. It was a brilliant, majestic presence, unlike anything I had ever seen. He was an angel. I had no doubt about that. He was tall, with wings made of pure golden energy, and his voice rumbled like thunder. "Cassian, listen carefully." I knelt, unable to do anything else. On November 23rd, 2024, humanity will face a series of disasters. Earthquakes, floods, and conflicts will spread destruction and suffering. This is a call to prayer, repentance, and spiritual preparation. You must share this message. Before I could respond, the angel showed me visions. Cities being destroyed by giant waves, panicked people fleeing earthquakes, and darkness covering the world. But how? I tried to ask, but was pushed back. I woke up with paramedics around me. My attackers had fled, but the angel's message remained with me, clear as day. After the third experience, I could no longer ignore the call that had been made to me. I spent weeks trying to wrap my head around what the angel had said, but to be honest, I was terrified. How could someone like me, an ordinary, flawed man, carry such a grand message? I began to mentally revisit each near-death experience I had, as if I were putting together pieces of a cosmic puzzle. It was then that I realized that each of them had taught me something essential, 3 fundamental lessons that have become my guide ever since. The first lesson, spiritual perspective. My first NDE, the car accident, had shown me that we are much more than our physical bodies. I remembered the feeling of freedom floating above the accident site, the conversation with the luminous presence, and the infinite peace I experienced in the bucolic countryside. It taught me that our earthly concerns, our fears, ambitions, and pains are temporary. What really matters is what we carry in our spirit. At the time, I thought this was the only lesson I needed to learn, but I realized it was just the beginning. The second lesson, spiritual presence. My second NDE, during the health crisis in New York, brought a new layer of understanding. It was not enough to just know that we are spirits living human experiences. It was necessary to be fully present in the here and now. I remembered the scenes of my life playing on the screen, the moments lost to distraction or arrogance, and I felt a weight of regret. Since then, I've done my best to live each moment as if it were my last, to be present with the people around me and to appreciate the little things that I previously ignored. The third lesson, spiritual purpose. The third experience, with the angel's warning, was the most difficult to accept. I was confronted with the reality that each of us has a role to play in the grand divine plan. The angel did not appear to scare me, but to give me a mission, to warn people about impending disasters and the need for spiritual reconnection. At first, I struggled with it. Who am I to carry such responsibility? But over time, I understood that my role was not to convince people, but simply to share what I experienced and let them choose what to do with it. Today, I see these 3 lessons as a gift. They transformed me from a lost man to someone who understands the true purpose of life, living with perspective, presence, and purpose. After my third near-death experience, I faced a challenge I didn't expect: disbelief. The visions I received were so clear and real to me, but when I tried to share them with others, the reaction was often one of skepticism. One of the first to hear me was Jonathan Hale, a longtime friend. He was an engineer, practical and skeptical by nature. When I told him about the angel, the disasters he had predicted, and the specific date of November 23, 2024, Jonathan crossed his arms and looked at me with an expression of disbelief. "Cassian," he began, "I respect what you've been through, but this sounds, exaggerated. Why you? Why wasn't this message sent to world leaders or scientists who could do something about it?" I took a deep breath, already expecting this question. "Jonathan, I ask myself this every day, but maybe that's exactly why. Because I'm just an ordinary person. I have no power or influence, but I have a voice. And maybe that message is for everyone, not just those in charge." He frowned, but said nothing more. The seed of doubt had been planted, but at the same time, I began to realize that I didn't need external validation to accomplish my mission. I began connecting with spiritual people in the Sedona community. It was there that I met Eleanor Maddox, a spiritual doctor who had also had near-death experiences. She was the first person who truly understood the weight of what I was carrying. "Cassian," she said one day, as we walked along one of Sedona's trails, "messages like yours are never easy to accept, neither for those who receive them nor for those who hear them. But you were chosen for a reason. Your job is not to convince anyone. It's seeding the idea. The people who need to hear it will hear it." These words gave me strength to continue. At the same time, I struggled internally. Part of me wanted to ignore what I had experienced, go back to a normal life and pretend that none of this happened. But it was no longer possible. The events that the angel showed me were recorded in my mind like a movie. The images of destruction, people suffering, and above all, the darkness that seemed to spread across the world couldn't leave me alone. And so, I decided I would do my part, regardless of what people thought. I would start by sharing the message, one conversation at a time, one person at a time. The angel's vision was not something I could forget even if I wanted to. The images he showed me were engraved in my memory as if they were tattoos on the soul. Each scene was vivid, detailed, and carried an almost unbearable emotional weight. The first vision, earthquakes, and destruction. The angel took me to a city that appeared to be Los Angeles. Skyscrapers swayed like fragile toys, and streets cracked, swallowing cars and people. The sound was deafening. Screams, sirens, and the crash of collapsing buildings. "These events," said the angel, his voice echoing in my mind, "are not punishments, but consequences. The earth responds to the imbalance caused by humanity. This is a call to reconnect with the Creator." I tried to argue. "But is this inevitable? We cannot do anything with it." He looked at me with compassion. "Prayer, love, and unity can reduce the impact. Humanity's choices will determine the extent of suffering." The second vision, floods and despair. Then he showed me lands being swallowed by violent waters. Houses floated like pieces of wood in a raging sea. People climbed onto roofs, hoping for rescue, but many were carried away by the current. I recognized New York in the vision. The Statue of Liberty was nearly submerged, its torch barely visible above the waters. It was a desolate scene. "Water cleanses, but it also destroys," said the angel. "Humanity needs to understand that it does not control nature. This is an opportunity to rediscover humility and balance." The third vision, war and spiritual darkness. Finally, the angel showed me scenes of conflict. Soldiers marched through destroyed streets, tanks rolled through rubble, and the sky was filled with smoke and fire. In a vision, I saw people fighting for food, while others, desperate, sought shelter from the cold and hunger. "But the worst will not be physical," said the angel. "Spiritual darkness will be the biggest challenge. People will move away from each other, lose faith, and forget about love. Only those who unite in prayer and purpose can overcome." These visions, although terrifying, had something in common. There were always small pockets of light. Amidst the chaos, groups of people gathered to pray, support, and care for each other. "What you are seeing," the angel explained, "is the choice that each person will have. You can spread the message and be a beacon, or you can hide and watch the darkness grow." It was at that moment that I understood the true purpose of my mission. It wasn't just a warning of destruction. It was a message of hope. People could still change the course of events. The vision ended, and the angel placed a hand on my shoulder, radiating an indescribable peace. "Remember, Cassian, November 23rd, 2024 is not an end, but a point of choice. Share what you saw. Some will listen, others don't, but everyone will have a chance." And then I was thrust back into the darkness and into my body. After my third NDE, my life turned into a search for meaning. The angel's visions and the weight of his words wouldn't leave me alone. I spent days, then weeks, trying to understand what it meant to share the message. How could someone like me do something so great? At first, the task seemed impossible. I lived in Sedona, a small, quiet town, surrounded by people who sought spiritual peace but who were also suspicious of any idea that sounded apocalyptic. Even so, I started slowly. My first impulse was to share what I experienced with Eleanor Maddox, the spiritual doctor I met shortly after returning to Arizona. She listened attentively, without interrupting me, as I told her everything: the angel, the visions of disaster, the fateful date. When I finished, there were tears in her eyes. "Cassian," she said, holding my hands, "this isn't just a burden, it's a gift. You were chosen because you have already survived 3 moments when you should have left. This is no coincidence." His words brought some comfort, but also new doubts. "Eleanor," I asked, "how can I get people to listen? How can I convince them that this is not just a fabrication or delusion?" She smiled, almost as if she expected this question. "You don't need to convince anyone. Your task is to sow. Whether or not to accept the message is up to each person." I decided to share my story with a small local spiritual group. I told the experiences I had and the message I received. Some people were fascinated, while others looked at me in disbelief. Jonathan Hale, my skeptical friend, was also present. After the meeting, he took me aside. "Cassian, do you really believe all this? Don't you think it could be trauma from your mind trying to make sense?" "Jonathan," I replied, more calmly than I expected, "I've questioned this for years, but the details, the emotions, that didn't come from my mind. It came from something much bigger." He didn't respond, but something in his expression changed. Maybe he wasn't convinced, but I knew I had planted a doubt. After that night, I decided I could no longer hesitate. I began to write my story, putting every detail of the visions into words, so that they could be read by anyone willing to listen. It wasn't about becoming famous or getting attention. It was about giving people a chance to choose. I started organizing meetings, talking to strangers, and, most importantly, preparing my own soul. I didn't know if I would be alive to see November 23rd, 2024, but I knew that, until then, I had a mission to accomplish: spreading the message that love, prayer, and unity could change everything. Accepting this mission was not easy, but little by little I realized that I was not alone. I would meet resistance and skepticism, yes, but I would also find people who would listen, and maybe that would be enough. As time passed, I began to realize that the events described by the angel were not just a distant possibility, but something that seemed to be getting closer and closer. The world was changing in ways that echoed the visions I received. In 2023, news of natural disasters has become more frequent. Earthquakes hit areas that had never experienced such force, and floods devastated entire cities. The news spoke of ongoing wars, global political tensions, and an increasingly divided world. Every headline seemed to scream at me, as if reminding me of what the angel had shown. I remember one night in March 2024 when I sat down to watch the news. A historic storm had hit the east coast of the United States, causing mass destruction. The images of submerged houses and people fighting the floods brought me back to the vision of the angel. I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. "Did you see the news?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Yes," she replied calmly. "I knew it would start. Cassian, you need to intensify the message. Time is running out." The more I talked about November 23rd, 2024, the more extreme reactions I received. Some people called me a visionary, while others openly ridiculed me. Jonathan Hale, who continued to be a critical voice in my life, tried to talk me out of it. "Cassian," he said over coffee, "people are getting scared because of you. You're not helping anyone." "I'm not the one causing the fear, Jonathan," I replied. "I'm just sharing what I saw. You know as well as I do that something is wrong with the world." Jonathan didn't respond, but his expression betrayed an uneasiness he didn't want to admit. At the same time, I found unexpected support. People in Sedona began organizing prayer and meditation groups, inspired by my words. Messages arrived from faraway places, from people who heard my story and decided to share. It wasn't a big move, but it was something. As I prepared for the fateful day, I realized that my mission was not just to warn of physical disasters, but to help people reconnect spiritually. The angel's visions made it clear that the true danger was not earthquakes or floods, but the spiritual darkness that threatened to consume humanity. The world needed love, prayer, and unity, and I would do everything in my power to plant those seeds. As November approached, I felt a mixture of urgency and peace. There was a lot to do, but I also knew I wasn't alone. The angel's message wasn't just mine, it was from all of us. It's November 2024. The air in Sedona feels charged, as if nature itself is holding its breath. As I write these words, the 23rd is just 2 days away, and the weight of what is to come is more palpable than ever. Events around the world are converging on something I cannot ignore. Yesterday, an earthquake struck Southern California, causing massive damage. The images showed crumbling buildings and cracked streets, exactly as the angel had shown me years ago. In another part of the world, a tropical storm of unprecedented strength hit the Philippines, displacing thousands of people. At the same time, political tensions between countries appeared to be on the verge of exploding into a conflict that could affect us all. I no longer need to explain to people what is happening. Those who once called me an alarmist now look at me with eyes full of questions. Sedona, my base of operations, has become a hub for those who are hearing my call. Small prayer and meditation groups formed, led by people who connected with me along the way. Eleanor has been my pillar. Last night, as we sat around a campfire with other community members, she said something that kept echoing in my mind. Cassian, you did your part. It's not your responsibility what happens next, but know that your words are already making a difference. Jonathan also showed up. To my surprise, he apologized for his initial disbelief. Cassian, he said, with a gleam of sincerity in his eyes, maybe you're right. I have no answers, but what's happening now, I can't ignore it any longer. It was a moment of relief and, at the same time, a reminder that even the most skeptical person can find space for faith. As much as I dedicated myself to sharing this message, I also had to prepare myself internally. I have spent the last few weeks in deep meditation, seeking strength for what is to come. I don't know exactly what will happen on the 23rd, but I feel like my mission will culminate at that moment. Deep down, there is a strange peace within me. Not because I believe everything will be resolved painlessly, but because I know I did what I could. The rest is in the hands of humanity and the divine. With the world in a state of unrest, my latest message has been clear. What we will face is not the end, but an opportunity, a chance to choose between love and fear, between unity and division. What comes next will be a reflection of our collective choices. This message echoes in my mind as I wait for what is to come. Today is November 21st, 2024, and everything in my life seems to be converging towards this moment. The 23rd is right around the corner, but it hasn't arrived yet. I live every second as if the weight of the world were on my shoulders, and at the same time, I feel a strange peace, as if I have fulfilled my part in the great divine plan. Since this morning, the city has been busier than usual. People began to arrive from different parts of the country, some guided by reports from friends, others simply seeking a spiritual refuge. I don't know how my message reached so many people, but they did, and that's what matters. At the local cafe where I drink tea most mornings, I overheard nervous conversations. A woman talked about news of recent disasters, while a man mentioned that he was considering going to the mountains in case something happens. It is as if an uneasiness hangs in the air, even among those who are unaware of the angel's message. Jonathan Hale came to visit me in the afternoon. His posture, always so confident and skeptical, seemed more hesitant. Cassian, he said, as he looked at the reddish horizon of the mountains, do you really believe that the world can change? That people can change? I looked at him for a moment before responding. Yes, I believe it, because I've seen it happen. I saw people who opened themselves to something bigger, who found love and forgiveness even in the midst of chaos. But it's not easy, Jonathan. It's a daily choice. He didn't respond, but stood there with me, silent, as if absorbing my words. Tonight, some local groups will gather to pray and meditate on the spiritual whirlpools. I was invited, but I feel like my task now is to prepare myself. Most of my time is being dedicated to mentally revisiting the messages I've received, reaffirming that I've done everything I can so far. I spent hours meditating on my balcony, looking at the mountains under the deep blue sky. I feel like time is slowing down, as if the universe is waiting for something. I don't know what the 23rd will bring, but that doesn't matter now. My only certainty is that we are at a crucial point. and every choice made in the days leading up to it can shape what will come. We are all connected, I murmur to myself, a reminder of the angel's words. May we remember this before it is too late. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.